The opinions expressed on the following audio program are solely those of the host and the guests. Burner Podcast is an independently produced, not-for-profit show and is not associated with the Burning Man organization or its subsidiaries. The views expressed are not representative of the entire Burning Man community and are presented here for entertainment purposes only. In short, calm the fuck down. It's just a podcast.
All right, episode 27. It is 243 days until the man burns, and it's 2016. Holy shit, it's a whole new year. It's just a whole new time. I don't know. It actually doesn't really mean anything, I guess. It's just this arbitrary number we designed based around our circulation and blah, blah. I don't know. I don't really have a whole lot of information about what goes into creating a year. All I know is that things are supposed to start and end, and you're supposed to make resolutions, and I was expecting this new year to start and like a bunch of new shit to happen all of a sudden. I don't know why I was expecting that. I consider myself to be a more intelligent individual than that, but obviously that was a mistake because not a whole lot changed. I feel pretty much the exact same as I did before the stroke of midnight when it became 2016. Anyway, I guess we're like a little bit closer to the technological singularity. That's the one thing I'm counting down to. That's the only thing I think about, honestly. That's when I think about years changing, all I'm waiting for is to see if Ray Kurzweil was right. If some amazing shit is going to happen by the time that comes around. But, you know, again, it'll happen so incredibly gradually that we won't even notice, because that is kind of what's happening with technology. And you know, like your iPhone, your cell phone, your whatever, like it's not actually grafted into your skin. It's not a part of your human body yet. But could you imagine going somewhere without it? I mean, it might as well be. So it'll just be like the next step before, you know, we're coming out of the womb and putting this piece of technology into your body. You know what? I'm blabbing on and on. The last few weeks have been kind of rough for me. I'm gonna do a me opening, talk about moi. And it's funny. I am often tempted to use this platform to totally go on a shit talking spree about people that have upset me. Generally, people don't upset me, and generally, I don't actually feel the overwhelming desire to do that. I'm just saying that for the sake of the intro, but it's funny, you know, to have this like massive megaphone at your fingertips, and I can see how it can be a huge temptation. Like I could be like a Mark Maron type podcaster, where I just get on there and dump all my personal stuff. That stuff kind of comes out throughout the interview, but I try really valiantly to stay as impartial as possible. I kind of share what's going on in my personal life, I don't really hide things back, but at the same time, I'm trying not to throw other people under the bus either. And I mean, I hope that comes across to any of my loved ones who do listen to the show, who can see that I am making a valiant effort not to do that. But I guess the reason that I'm bringing that up is because it is going to tie in to today's show, because some experiences that I've had in the past 3 or 4 weeks, they've hit some like really tough triggers. Some depression and anxiety has been like switched off, and not a whole lot. I mean, it's not like I'm falling apart. I'm better equipped to handle a lot of these things than I used to be. But the past 3 weeks or so have been pretty rough. And, you know, part of it is the holidays. Like the holidays, I never used to think of the holidays as kind of a tough time of year. But, you know, when I would sort of like vent to friends and family members about some of the difficulties and challenges that I've been facing in the past few weeks, that's something that they would point out, that the holidays do get challenging. I don't really know why that is. Something about the red and green lights. It's cold. People are out with their loved ones. There's a different energy in the air. It is a time of the year where, it would be nice to have a significant other to like cuddle up with at home. Then like the summer comes around and I'm like, I want to be single, or, you know, whatever. I don't know. But the last 2 or 3 weeks have been kind of rough. And thinking about the fact that it's been pretty rough made it the perfect timing for this roundtable that producer Meg has been wanting to put together for some time. She'd really been wanting to do it and waiting for the right time to present this particular idea to me for a show topic. And it is, of course, something that's very near and dear to my heart, and it's mental health. Dealing with the challenges of depression, anxiety, and all the other fantastic horsemen of the apocalypse that come with the mental health issues that a lot of us face. And in this community, it's funny, I've talked to people before casually who think that there's a lot more people with mental health issues in our community specifically. I don't know if that's necessarily true. One factor that I am certain is a huge contribution to our perception of there being higher levels of mental health issues in our community is we're a lot more open. We talk about it. It's not something that most of us are ashamed of talking about. And that is a very important aspect for me, and you'll hear in the show, I do talk about sort of what drives me to create art even. And this thing, Burner Podcast, it is one of the art forms, one of the outlets that I am so blessed to have. And a lot of it is specifically because I come from a culture, for anybody who has not kept up, I'm Persian, family is from Iran. We do come from a culture that tends to brush a lot of stuff under the rug. And one of those things was that I was a victim of child molestation, obviously, as a child. For the most part, therapists have told me it doesn't look like it's done quite so much damage to me. And I'm not afraid to talk about it. I'm very open and comfortable talking about it. I do see my quote-unquote victimizers as victims themselves. I saw them as victims when I was a child. I immediately felt sorry for them. And we can get into some of that stuff in future episodes. But the long and short of it is that I do believe that being able to talk about these things is very, very important. And that is a massive driving factor for why our team does this show. And today's show is no exception. There was a previous episode, if you'll remember, a sober burn with our anonymous guest. I would love to do that kind of episode again and not have the guest be anonymous. And be able to just have all of our names out there and just strip naked and tell you about all of these things that are happening. Because I think the more that we discuss these things, the more we talk about them, the more we can help minimize the damage that we inflict upon our future generations. Brushing things under the rug has pretty much never worked in the history of ever. But let's get to today's show, which does have a lot to do with all these things that we've been discussing. The holidays, the difficulty that I've been having the past few weeks, the triggers that I mentioned. It's, some experiences that I had like set off some triggers, and now I'm like a little bit more of a panicky mess than I used to be. Generally, I'm pretty fucking zen, but the past couple of weeks have been rough. Getting back on my horse, though, I'm all right. And recording the interview for today's show really helped. It really did come at the right time because it is the holidays, and I know that there's a lot of our listeners are probably dealing with some challenges that are not as commonplace in our lives. So I think today's show couldn't have come at a better time. It is a conversation. I should definitely reiterate or at least iterate that this is not meant to take the place of any professional therapy that you could obtain. Definitely, if you are dealing with any sort of challenges, if you are having issues, you should seek an actual therapist. You know what, even if you're not, I always say I have yet to meet a person who could not benefit from therapy. I've yet to meet somebody out there. I mean, I'm sure they're out there somewhere. There are 7 billion people on the planet. He's out there, she's out there, I don't know, but I've never met them. Worst comes to worst, I always say it's better to go grocery shopping, when you're not hungry yet. If you go when you're hungry, it's already too late. You're going to buy a bunch of junk food. But, if you just make sure you go grocery shopping on a regular schedule, then the food will be in the fridge when you need it. And that's sort of where I'm at right now in this particular cross-section of my life. I have collected all these tools, and the challenges of the past 3 weeks, they're a lot easier to handle because I've already been through a bunch of therapy and I do meditate regularly and et cetera, et cetera. And so I was able to reach into my toolbox and pull out these wonderful emotional first aid kit, if you will, and go to work. So that's how I'm able to, do this thing here for you and make sure the show goes out on time and not lock myself in a closet. Of course, our roundtable today is with producer Meg. So, that drinking game that we always joke about, references to producer Meg or her brother Paul. I guess, I don't know. You might as well. It's one of those shows where you might as well just chug the whole bottle of vodka because she's sitting in on this roundtable and she's going to go ahead and strip naked for you and tell you all of her deepest, darkest secrets the way that I normally do. Producer Meg, for those of you who don't know, who you probably wouldn't know, she's currently working on completing her master's in psychology and working on getting a license to practice as a LPCC, which stands for Licensed Professional Clinical Counselor in California. And then the next step is she's going to be working on her PhD in psych research. That's down the road. And she's mentioned that on the show even before. She's really into the research stuff, because she's a fucking nerd. And of course, the second person in our roundtable here is, I'm going to start referring to her as RC Finn. Very good friend, Finn. Finn is short for Fernell. Finn is one of our regional contacts here in San Diego, and she really is an amazing individual and an important community figure. If you've come to San Diego, if you have a few friends here, you've probably at some point run into Finn. And she also likes to do sword fighting with fire. She hurt me doing that once on accident. And then she hurt herself at another party. That was also fun. But I'm going to call her RC Finn because it kind of sounds like a rapper name. Or like one of those old RC cars that I used to play with as a child. I don't know. But they both have lots to contribute. We're going to talk about all kinds of mental health issues. One or two of us will cry, might cry. It's kind of a heavy episode. And during the course of the conversation, Finn came up with the name of today's episode, which is entitled Love, Light, and Lithium. I go by Mr. Arash, even though nobody calls me Mr. Welcome to Burner Podcast.
On the first part of the journey, I was looking at all the life. There were plants and birds and rocks and things. There was sand and hills and rain. The first thing I met was the fly with the balls and the sky with no clouds. The heat was hot and the ground was dry, but the air was full of sound. I've been through the desert on a horse with no name, and it felt good to be out of the rain. In the desert, you can't remember your name, 'cause there ain't no one for to give you no name.
Sounds quite as terrible as I thought it would.
Yeah, it's, part of what happens, I guess that's the only difference, is, I still am not, a fan of my voice, per se.
See, I know lots of people who are a fan of your voice.
Really?
Yes.
That's
Oh my
weird.
god.
That's super weird. I just learned to just, keep talking and stop. As with any art, this is what I've learned, is, the more you produce and the more you put out there, the less you obsess about that one piece. Mm-hmm. So, if you take 1,000 photos, it's okay if a couple of them suck. And that's where people really obsess with perfectionism, and they have this one piece of work that they just refuse to put out. So that's where with podcasting, I just knew from the other show that I do,
right,
that after you hit 5 years, you're like, fuck it. I say stupid shit all the time that I used to go back and be like, oh, I should edit that. No, fuck it. Who cares?
And that's your prerogative from your perspective because you've done multiples of these. But for me, it's just going to be this one.
Yeah. I think my point about it...
Don't count on that, by the way. There are a lot of things we could talk to you about in the community. Just this is the one that I think is the most important right now.
No, you guys actually... So a couple of things. The timing on this particular interview is either incredibly perfect or incredibly not. And I will explain the reason for that now. Okay. And we're going to actually, I think this will be the next one that we'll release immediately because it is around, it is the holidays.
Yes.
So the holidays kick a lot of our asses, and I did not realize how harshly people's asses get kicked until I happen to be dealing with something right now. So the long and short of it is your gracious host has had his heart broken recently.
Oh.
And he's really cute. But here's the thing.
No, that was actually an I'm so sorry. I hate to hear that.
No, it is mildly adorable. But the real thing about it that's interesting because of today's episode is that it's not so much that the heartbreak in question was something deep and profound that has affected me and now I'm feeling like anxiety and depression. Mm-hmm. It's that this thing came completely out of left field, and whatever experiences I had with this individual happened to trigger some traumas that I've had from childhood that I have not healed, and I had no fucking idea were there. They just completely boiled to the surface out of nowhere. Right. So
situational anxiety and depression as opposed to chemical anxiety and depression.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's, the past couple of weeks have been rough. Like, really rough. And you guys know me. You've known me, what, like 3+ years now?
Yeah.
Right?
Which is weird to think about.
Yeah. 3+ years. And I mean, I'm generally pretty, like, straight line, like I can, get into my meditative practice or whatever and just like check out. Mm-hmm. I've done a lot of work to get here because I've talked multiple times on this show about what a train wreck I was the first 2/3 of my life. But this thing that happened in the past couple of weeks completely took over, and like now I've been feeling like panic attacky, like I've almost cried 3 times today. I am not at like normal capacity. So, and the reason that that's interesting in regards to today's show is that obviously we are going to be talking about like a lot of what Meg just referenced, which is the chemical versus the situational, and how people do generally, like when people are trying to be helpful, or they're not, they're just being dicks. They say like, let's just like snap out of it and stop being sad. And the experience that I've had in the past couple of weeks really like reminded me of how dramatically it can take over.
The phrase "stop being sad" just makes me want to dick punch people.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not even kidding. Like
people without dicks.
I don't care. I'll dick punch you till you have a dick, and then I'll dick it. I hate that phrase.
Cunt
Snap
punch.
out of it.
Yeah.
Actually, my daughter uses the phrase "cunt punch" all the time.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
And I was like squeaky about it at first. I was like, I'm not sure how I feel about this particular phrase. So,
but yeah, the snap out of it is definitely.
I hate that.
It is. It's pretty mind blowing. Do you think people that use that phrase like have just never actually dealt with depression?
I think that people who use that phrase have no idea how to deal with actual emotional responses to things. I think that people who use phrases like "snap out of it" or it's all a learning experience, it makes you stronger. I think people who approach it like that probably have issues like that of their own that they are unwilling to deal with.
Yeah.
They are unwilling to have that level of vulnerability that makes them actually able to address when someone, because I'm willing to bet right now that sometime during this interview, one of the 3 of us is going to cry, if not all of us.
I want to cry right now.
I've wanted to cry for the past 30 days.
Yeah.
It's winter. I hate winter.
Yeah.
Emotional vulnerability is, in my opinion, one of the reasons that mental health disorders and things like depression and bipolar disorder and anxiety, why those things have a stigma. Because if you are experiencing those emotions and you share your experience in a truthful and open way, other people are compelled, forced, available to, however you want to look at it, to also explore their own reactions, both to your emotions and to what their emotions would be in the same situation. So empathy.
Yeah.
And empathy is a fucking scary thing because empathy requires you to change your life a lot of the time. When you look at somebody else's situation and you can feel what they're feeling and you can relate to their situation, to their place in life, to where they are, a lot of times that requires you to then take a good fucking look at your own life and change.
Yeah.
You know, you can talk. I'm so cis white, privileged, whatever, and I can talk about a million times how incredibly terrible it is that cops will go out and shoot a little black kid for playing with a fake gun in a park. You can date this episode by that reference. My kid's never going to get shot in a park for playing with a fake gun.
Yeah.
My kid is never going to... That's not going to happen. My girls are white. Even my half Mexican stepdaughters are white as fuck looking. It's never going to happen to my kids that way. I cannot actually feel their pain. Things like a breakup or other slightly less life-threatening things that you share in an open fashion, other people can feel. I can feel your pain from a breakup. And when I said, aw, it wasn't, oh, cute puppy Arash is sad. It was, fuck, I've been there, man. That shit sucks. I know.
Well, a couple of things that you said actually do very much connect to that. I mean, the first thing I guess I want to ask is empathy versus sympathy. I have been into many arguments with people about which one's which. So do you guys know which one's which? Because one of them is you're actually feeling it. The other one is that you're understanding.
Sympathy is when you understand and you feel sorry for, feel pity for, feel something for someone, but you're not feeling their emotion.
Okay.
Empathy, and I can speak to this pretty clearly because this is one of the things you train for in psychology, is to develop an empathic relationship with your clients. Empathy is being there. It's putting yourself in their place.
Okay.
Not feeling for their place, putting yourself in their place.
Now,
so if you say to me that you're feeling suicidal because you broke up with somebody, if I sympathize with you, I was like, that sucks. It sucks that you're feeling that sad about this situation. Let's talk about that. But I'm not saying, yeah, I want to die too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel that. I want to die too, Arash. I'm not saying that. That's empathy.
Okay.
Empathy is you want to die and so do I.
Yeah.
And I want to bring us all together and let's all go there. Let's all go there together. It'll be wonderful. Sympathy is, wow, that sucks.
Yeah.
That sucks for you.
So what's the healthier one to do?
Depends on how much vulnerability you want to have, I would imagine.
Yeah, I don't think of it as there being one is healthier than the other. I think they're just different approaches and that both are necessary in healthy amounts. It's when it becomes too much so. Mm-hmm. In either, in an imbalanced fashion, that's an issue.
I agree.
Okay, so if I'm dealing, for example, with a psychopath who is incapable of feeling, is it empathy or sympathy?
Probably both.
Okay.
Honestly, someone who is a psychopath, and it's the same for a sociopath, but just from a slightly different perspective, they are totally capable of feeling all the things you're feeling, but they don't give a fuck. Mm-hmm. Your response to their actions does not mean anything to them. Mm-hmm. Their desire to say what they want to say, do what they want to do, is chemically based. There's no such thing as a situational psychopath.
Yeah,
if you're a psychopath, it's a chemical thing.
Yeah.
Which is not the same with mood disorders. There are multiple types of mental health issues. There are mood disorders, which are things like anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder. There are the personality disorders. So that's things like codependency. Well, the codependency is not actually technically diagnosable. It's a symptom of a number of other things. The things like pervasive developmental disorder and the various unsociable behaviors, narcissism, things like that. Those are personality disorders. And then there are the atypical brain disorders, psychopathy, sociopathy, dissociative personality issues, things like that. And there are three different things because they affect the brain and the chemistry of the brain and the electronics in the brain differently.
So that is what I'm trying to get at, is that so if we're dealing with somebody who is just saying like, oh, you know what, just snap out of it. are they choosing not to empathize, or is it possible that from time to time you're dealing with somebody whose that part of their brain simply is not operating on the same level as yours?
I would say, in my opinion, is that honestly, most of the time, if people are reacting to you like that, it's either because they're uncomfortable. Well, it's because they're uncomfortable, but it's either because it's brought up something for them and they don't want to deal with it, or they now feel responsible because they've engaged that empathy and they don't know what to do with that. They don't know what would be best for you, and so they push that responsibility away.
So it's not that their empathy is not working; it's that it's coming up and they're pushing it away.
Yeah.
It's avoidant.
Yeah. It's an avoidance technique. And that's one way that a lot of people cope with things that are emotionally distressing. Is as much as we like to disregard everything that Freud and Jung ever said, coping mechanisms are a thing. Yeah. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, the guys were douches, but coping mechanisms are a thing. Archetypes are a thing. There's validity in every theory. Coping mechanisms, those of us who have a mental health disorder, a mental health diagnosis of one sort or another, have coping mechanisms that we use all the time. People who don't have a diagnosis, doesn't mean they don't have a disorder, just means they don't have a diagnosis.
Just means insurance isn't paying for it.
Yeah. Also have coping mechanisms. Everybody has coping mechanisms. Yeah. There are things that you are uncomfortable dealing with. I am uncomfortable dealing with spiders. I think they should all die. 8 legs is way too many. My coping mechanism is to scream, and my daughter will come and take the spider and remove it from my presence. That's how I cope with spiders. My coping mechanism when I am confronted with someone who is suicidal is to hide. Because if there's one thing that's going to trigger me, it's suicidal ideation. Yeah. I will jump right on in to empathizing with you. And
to a point that's unhelpful.
To a point that doesn't work.
Yeah.
It doesn't work for me because now I'm there too.
Yeah. It's like you walk by and somebody's at the bottom of a hole and you jump down in there.
Yeah. And I'm not good at putting a rope in.
Yeah.
I'm good at jumping in the hole with you.
Yeah.
But then we're both fucked.
Yeah. Which, by the way, that was always that story on
that story. Yeah.
But then that ends with him saying, "It's okay. I've been down here before, and I'm going to show you the way out." Yes,
and that's actually kind of why Finn and I are here.
The West Wing.
Well, that. So, our faithful listeners probably understand that we've been slowly evolving our show.
Yes. I want to get first. I want to end this one here. So. Can we just say, though, that would it be a fair assessment, then, that if somebody is saying, why don't you just snap out of it, what you're dealing with is somebody who's having an even harder time dealing with their issues than you are?
Not necessarily, but...
I feel like words like harder that's very subjective. And so it's not oppression Olympics. So don't try and post things into, they're having a rougher time than I am, or... They're just having difficulty with this thing, even for you bringing it up.
Yeah.
So it's not harder or easier. It's just, in this isolated incident, they can't cope with the addition of
your
whatever
problems.
you're bringing.
Yeah, whatever it is you're bringing to the table, they don't want to serving.
Yeah.
And it's not. I agree with Finn. It doesn't mean that they have a harder time dealing with a breakup than you do. It's not that they have. A trigger that's going to cause them to go apeshit if you talk to them about it. It's just that they can't add that onto their plate right now.
Yeah.
And that's most people with most things.
Yeah.
It might be isolated. Like, maybe they would be fine dealing with a breakup with you at a later date, but maybe something just happened to them and they're oversaturated.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. So yeah, that was if Burner Podcast is a movie, like that was like the opening action scene. So now we're gonna roll opening credits. And
can I spoiler the fuck out of us now? Like, we're the spaceships flying over the desert planet before the
foreshadowing happening.
Yes, we're all the things
already. So let's talk about sort of what brought up the idea of doing this episode, and I want to do like the 5-minute version of each of you.
Okay.
Of your biographies. Mm-hmm. So go ahead. Producer Meg.
We've been talking for a long time about evolving the podcast. As much fun as we've been having doing personality-based shows, like look how awesome this person is and what kind of cool shit they do in their life. There are a lot of topics that are universal and a lot of subject matter that spreads across the entire burnerverse. And our team has seen fit to decide that we'd like to try and evolve in that direction where we're focusing on those things.
We do have a lot of people who have battled a lot of mental health issues in our community.
I agree. I mean, the statistics say that 20% of adults in the United States will have a diagnosable severe mood disorder episode in their life. It's 20%. That's 1 out of 5 people, adult, in the whole country. And I'm willing to bet it's a hell of a lot higher in the burner community.
That's what I was going to say. It's anecdotal, but we're guessing
willing to bet
way higher.
If you consider that different subsets of people have higher rates, like queer people, as an example, and women, people who have experienced some sort of domestic abuse, trauma, stuff like that. The burner community overall is fairly welcoming to people who are, quote, fringe cases, and those cases are that group of people are going to have higher rates, and therefore our community, it makes sense that we have higher rates. There are a lot of correlative things too. The correlation between mood disorders and drug use and drug abuse is very high. There's no causative. It's not like you use drugs and so now you're depressed, or you're depressed so you're going to use a bunch of drugs. There's no causative information, but the correlation is incredibly high. And so in a community where drug use is very high and is a thing that is correlated very highly to mood disorders, it's likely that we have more drug users than the average segment of the population. Probably have more depressed people too. A lot of for depression especially, a lot of the kind of self-medicating mechanisms that people both with diagnoses and without tend to utilize are important aspects of our community.
I can tell you, just even on a playful anecdotal level, like it's pretty much everybody I talk to has dealt with bullying. I mean, like everyone has been bullied. Like it's very, very common.
We're all freaks, and so of course we all got bullied. Like we're the freaks.
Yeah.
We're the freaky artist, chunky girl.
In some way, non-conforming.
We're all the not blonde Barbies.
Yeah.
And although I am blonde right now.
And bless you, by the way, blonde Barbies, if you're out there.
I have no objection to blonde Barbies.
We're not
blonde
saying
Barbies
you've
are
never
awesome.
had it hard,
But we aren't them for the most part. Like I don't really know a lot of people in our community who would fall into that physical and socioeconomic
sparkle ponies.
Well, I mean,
but no, even sparkle ponies aren't. Even sparkle ponies aren't. Sparkle ponies are taking their own weirdness to the furthest level they possibly can. They are maybe the guys in Roquet in their special enclaves of gigantic motorhomes are Barbie guys, but no, even the sparkle ponies are. They're taking they're flying their freak flag as high as they possibly can.
Well, and think of it as a case of think of it in terms of intersectionality. There's often a way in which someone is outside of the socially acceptable range of normal, and anytime that is the case, there's the possibility for bullying. So, for example, like generally when people think of sparkle ponies, they tend to think of very physically attractive, typically women. But if you consider how women are thought of in society, perhaps the fact that these people are focusing on an overly sexualized persona in the burner community has to do with some sort of treatment that they received from society as a whole.
Yeah.
So you really can't. You can't judge like that. So.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's part of it too, is that because our community for the most part, thinks like Finn just said. We don't judge, or we try really fucking hard not to judge, and we try and call ourselves on it when we do judge.
Yeah.
And so
an example of it would be the last 30 seconds.
People who feel judged in culturally normative society come here.
Yeah.
Or they come to some other enclave like this. There are lots and lots of subcultures in the United States where people go because they don't feel like they fit. This is just the one we've found.
Yeah.
This is the one we call family.
So give us the 5-minute biography.
The 5-minute Meg.
The 5-minute Meg. We've had little bits and pieces of Meg throughout the show, obviously.
Okay, well then I'm just going to stick to this. I'm bipolar. Bipolar disorder 2, actually. There are 4 different levels of bipolar disorder that you can have. Bipolar disorder 2 is not the worst. Not the best either. It means that I have manic episodes that are not full-blown mania, meaning I don't talk so fast you can't understand me and wander the streets at night looking for, the lost city of whatever the fuck.
Wander the streets at night for various reasons.
I do that, but I'm not looking for lost cities. And that I have depressive episodes. Generally, in order to receive a diagnosis, you have to have at least one of each a year. For most people, it's a lot more than that. And I was first diagnosed about 10 years ago, when my grandmother died, but it is likely I have been this way my entire life. Most people who are diagnosed with bipolar disorder are diagnosed before they turn 25. I was diagnosed in my late 30s. And when I look at my own patterns, I can go back into my teens and my 20s and see instances that I'm fairly sure were manic or depressive. And because the decision-making process in my own brain during those 2 times are very, very different. I have been extraordinarily fortunate in my choice of therapists over the past years. I had some really excellent cognitive behavioral therapy that has allowed me to minimize the number of cycles that I have per year, down to 2. I have 1 manic and 1 depressive. I'm manic from March to October, and I'm depressed from the end of October till the mid-March.
So is that connected to the seasonal affective disorder?
It is. We tied it into that deliberately, actually.
Okay.
I've always had seasonal affective disorder as well. And
did you know about that before this?
I knew about that my whole life. As soon as the days start getting shorter, it's just like, fuck it, I'm going to a cave.
Yeah.
I can't handle it. Which was really bad when I lived in the Midwest. It's less bad in San Diego because you can make the most of the sunlight hours that you have in a way that you can't in a place where it's -2.
Yeah.
We took Finn to the beach for her birthday, and she's like, "This is the best thing ever. This is not Pennsylvania." And I was like, "Yay!"
Because your birthday is in December.
No, her birthday's in January, but same difference.
Yeah.
No, we actually very deliberately, over the course of about 4 years, moved my cycles by recognizing when they were starting and kind of using coping mechanisms to push them one direction or another. So that I have 1 long depressed episode and 1 long moderate manic episode.
How do you push them one way or another?
You push it off. You stave off the chemical change.
How?
Changes in your medication.
Okay.
Or, which was how we did most of it, was changes in my medication while at the same time using various cognitive behavioral therapy techniques. I am a list maker by nature anyway. And so there's a process that you can be taught where, when you start having cycling thought patterns, if you start writing things down and you teach yourself, if I've written it down, it can come out of the cycle. And then the next thing that's circling, you write it down. And if you have to, you go back over it until you're carving it into your notebook paper, because the act of putting it in the note, putting it in your list, is what lets you make those associations in your brain to take it out of the cycling thought pattern. So I spent a bunch of years making a lot of lists. Yeah. So many lists.
Wow, that explains. I'm a list maker too.
It explains a lot about me.
List making is a coping is a very workable coping mechanism for a lot of sort of disordered thinking.
Yeah, that's fucking fascinating. I've been making like obsessively like I'm
this whole notebook where my stats are. Yeah. This is all listy type. This is all cognitive behavioral therapy. Literally,
that's amazing.
I make these notes and I will just write the same thing over and over again to get it the fuck out of my head. Yeah. And I keep them because sometimes I go back and I'm like, that's a great thought. Like this one says, I can do more than this. I wrote that probably 2-3 years ago. I can do more than this. So,
I've always been a list maker too. Well, I mean, once I started figuring out how to I found out that it was calming me down. Mm-hmm. and then I
by trial and error, you figured it out. Like you were making a list and you were like, suddenly you noticed that your breathing was changing, that your posture changed.
Yeah, it was, my mind was like bouncing all over the place. So like it got it out. And so
I had to have a professional get me to that place that you found on your own.
Yeah, that's interesting. But as I started to work further on my professional path, I did find that I had to snap out of obsessively making lists and actually do shit.
Yes. And that's, again,
like all coping mechanisms, sometimes they help move us forward, and sometimes they become a crutch. Yeah. Sometimes coping mechanisms, we have outgrown them or outlived them, and they're no longer appropriate for the situation we now find ourselves in.
Yeah, because your situation changes.
Yeah. Okay, so continue.
So and this is where, like, being a burner kind of saved me a little bit, is conveniently enough, the spring and the summer are when all the shit has to get done. And when I'm in my manic phase, I get a lot of shit done. It's awesome. I finish everything. It's cool. I take on way more work than I should. I take on a lot of things, and that's part of my manic thinking process too. It's one of the things that I still struggle with, is the belief that I can do everything. I can handle all the things and I don't need help and I got this. That's manic thinking. That's part of that process. I make horrible decisions. When I'm not using any of my coping mechanisms, when I'm not on my meds, when I'm in a bad place in either cycle, I make fucking horrible decisions. I can trace back every really fucked up decision in my life to an uncontrolled manic phase or an uncontrolled depressive phase.
Can you give an example?
Yeah. My divorce. I beat the crap out of my husband the night that he kicked me out of the house, and that was the last night I slept in the same house with my husband and my kids. I was just coming into spring. I was just coming into what I feel like as myself. I feel like I'm more me when I'm manic than when I'm depressed. And so in my head, that's the good time of year. That's when everything's supposed to be awesome. And he was making, we were poly, and he was making decisions based on wanting to spend time with my recently now at that time ex-girlfriend. She had broken up with me, but was still with him, and he wanted to spend time with her, and I lost my shit, and I beat the crap out of him. And he had me arrested for battery. That's the kind of thing that makes total fucking sense at the moment. And I mean, yes, there's a lot more history behind that. There's a lot of other in it. But if I had not been manic, I don't think I might have hit him once. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have had him up against the wall.
And then crawled into your room or something and just cried.
And then cried myself to sleep and apologized profusely and taking us to family counseling. Manic said, "Nah, you got this. You're just going to get him to understand that he is wrong." Boom.
So manic is almost like you've done a Scarface level of cocaine, and then the other side is almost like you've chugged a bunch of vodka and you're about to pass out.
Yeah. Manic is definitely like coke or uppers of whatever nature. Manic is that racing heart and that elevated adrenaline level and that higher, that belief that you are working on a more functional level. Yeah. That's manic.
Do people battling bipolar disorder have, like, I wonder, like, any guilt or shame associated with the fact that they kind of like the manic side of it, maybe?
Oh, fuck yeah. I love the manic side. I like me.
Yeah. From
my birthday till the end of Utopia. Me in that period, that's my favorite me. I love me then. But
you also have the potential to do the most damage.
But there is no point during that process where I'm not looking at it going, fuck, I really need to not be like this. How do I not be like this? And I'm much less like this than I was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
10 years ago. The entire 80s, I was like that person. I'm less that person now, but I still take a great level of pleasure in that upswing and that positive feeling to me of you can do everything. You can do everything. Not you can do anything. You can do everything.
And society encourages that.
It's if it wasn't you're crazy when you feel that way, you would totally just be like, you know, you're American go-getter. Yeah. But you feel just as bad for the depressive side. Mm-hmm. You feel just as bad for being that girl when you're fucking crying because of a kitten video.
Yeah.
It happens. Like, fuck. Yeah. It's ridiculous. And that's why you want to hide in a cave and not come out, because you know you look ridiculous.
And a lot of this is what led you to become interested in working as a professional mental health field. That's what we're working towards.
That's a huge part of it. Mm-hmm. Yes, I am currently working on getting my license to practice in California. Mm-hmm. My ultimate goal is research, but that's partially mania based, to be perfectly honest. I can do everything. I have questions, and I have questions about correlations and avenues that I don't feel are being adequately explored. And so research is what I want to be doing. Ultimately, this year I was consistently being presented with the concept that I need a license in order to be able to do what I do and have people listen to me as a person they should listen to when I say these things. Because people will listen to me, but they're like, yeah, but it's just Meg. And they go on about the thing. If it's Meg, LPCC, licensed by the state of California, it has a little bit more oomph behind it, because I'm doing what I would be doing anyway.
Yeah, no, that's the whole reason.
I need something behind it that gives it a little more weight.
Totally.
And that was put in my face several times this year in really, really unfortunate situations where I probably should have been listened to differently, or I feel like I should have been listened to.
Yeah, that's the whole reason I went to college.
Listen to me, I have authority on this thing.
Seriously.
Yeah, I got fucking nothing out of that. So, and you've served as the psych coordinator for multiple events. Is that correct? Is that the title?
I worked psych for Electric Poncho.
Okay.
And I did some volunteer shifts with the psych and medical at Element 11. Okay. I would love to be able to do psych at Utopia, but I ain't got the time for that shit. Yeah. I would have to quit doing all the other things I do at Utopia in order to just focus on psych, because it requires that kind of...
But you can do all the things.
See, the thing is, I actually can't. I just feel like I can.
Yeah.
Anybody who's seen me about 2 p.m. on Sunday of Utopia knows, oh, look, Meg's about to die. This is the part where Meg lays down and doesn't get up till Tuesday.
So let's get the 5-minute biography on Finn. What's everything that's wrong with you?
Oh, goodness. Well, it's interesting. I try not to think of it that way, because the things that quote, are wrong with me, end quote, are often the things that help me with other people.
Yeah.
But, I have like an alphabet soup. I've been diagnosed with PTSD, and PMMD, which is premenstrual mood dysphoria, which the jokes that men make about women's PMS being extra bad, that is actually accurate for me. It is
behaviorally.
And physically and everything.
Okay.
It's almost like, imagine bipolar disorder that is explicitly monthly.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That sounds like a boyfriend nightmare scenario.
I'm old enough now that I've had it for a while, and I've learned to...
You know it's coming.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. No, it has physical manifestations as well, so I can sort of feel it coming on, and warn anybody who's pertinent.
So in a situation like that, so do you, like, will you find yourself in exchanges with people and sort of like pull yourself back and say, okay, well, right now you've got this thing happening, so let's reanalyze the thoughts?
Yeah, one of my strengths from being so, quote, broken so long of my life is that I have a lot of awareness, and so I'm actually capable of articulating to people, like, I'm really anxious right now, and what I'm fearing may not be reality. Can I please just check in with you? Which a lot of people struggle with that.
You're
part.
so much better than that than I have ever been.
They just sort of violently express whatever it is that they're going through at other people, and people are blindsided. Whereas oftentimes I do get very, very anxious and fearful.
I would say my observation of life has been that the greatest fear that the majority of human beings have on the planet is that they are not in 100% control of their thoughts. I think that terrifies people. The idea that there are situations where, like, you have things happening in your brain that are making you not quite see reality. And that's why a lot of times, like something that you actually referenced earlier too, Meg, about like people, like if they figure it out, they stop doing it. People are generally intelligent enough. Like if they know that they're in a bad habit, creating bad habit, like doing bad things, hurting people around them, hurting themselves, they stop. But usually that autopilot is just happening and they don't realize they're doing it.
Right.
So what you're describing about, you know, being able to take a step back and ask, like, hey, is this actually happening right now?
Right. Yeah. The idea that that you just said about not being able to be in control of your thoughts, like that is a monumental duh for me. Like I'm not sure, that's not one of my fears because it seems an obvious part of
so not.
life.
It's so not. The majority of arguments you have with people is like you're trying to dissect something and understand it and be logical about it, but then you're dealing with people, again, my experience has been the majority of human beings on the planet. If you can explain to them, like, hey, you know, like right now, this thing that you did with that person, that was kind of manipulative. Right. And like, they will freak the fuck out.
Yeah, that's true. I think oftentimes because people don't, if you're not used to examining something, then having it brought up brings up by someone else, external, brings up a lot of defensiveness. Whereas not a lot of people have been raised to or taught or in an environment where they can go, let me examine that and see whether there's any truth in that. And I think one of the things that I struggle with is imposter syndrome. I generally think very poorly of myself. So if someone offers a criticism of me, it is not the immediate blow to my understanding of myself that
it is to me.
Right.
Because if I get a criticism, I'm like, the fuck? Do you know who I am?
Right. Whereas if someone's like, Finn, that's stupid, I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And then I can look at it and go, well, yeah, I probably should have done that thing differently or whatever. What I'm not so great as is and which I would like to be better at, like Meg, is to go, you know what? No, fuck you. That was fine. Yeah. But yeah. So post-traumatic stress disorder.
When were you diagnosed with these?
The post-traumatic stress disorder and PMMD were immediately after my divorce in 2001, around that time frame. And part of that was because if you have two people who suffer from some sort of chronic depression, it can be very, or even if you only have one person that has, a clinical depressive sort of situation, it can be, if you don't have the correct support, very, very draining on the relationship, and make the relationship exceedingly unhealthy, and compound everybody's issues. And we had a situation like that. And where we were both being very, very unhealthy to one another, compounding one another's problems. And
becomes a dance.
Yeah. And then we separated, and I had this feeling of having failed and fucked up everything.
Right.
I very much took on a lot of the burden, and so then it was an even deeper. It was like having situational depression on top of all of your other problems.
Yeah.
And it was that which made me. My daughter was very small, and I physically could not get up and take care of her. I was that depressed, and that. It's not like that for everybody, but oftentimes, if you have children, they're a huge motivating factor. And for me, my kid was a huge motivating factor to go and get help. Mm-hmm. And it was a process of going and getting help that a lot of my diagnosis came up and stuff.
Yeah. And that was, you said in 2001. Okay.
Yeah.
So we can safely say then, like, the majority of the challenges, we'll say, that both of you have faced are chemical based.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
I mean, I will suffer from situational depression when, bad shit happens.
Sure.
But my depressive cycle is definitely chemical based, and my manic cycle is. I mean, you can have situational mania, like, when you're like so fucking excited because something went so fucking perfect. That's a little bit what it feels like the whole time that you're manic. I don't really experience situational mania, but situational depression, yeah. But it is chemical with me. It's also behavioral. Because you everything is both. Everything is some combination of things. But
they start dancing together.
One feeds the other one. You develop habits based on how your brain is, how the electricity in your brain is going, how the chemicals in your brain are happening, and you develop new habits. Like most people put on weight during the holidays. I don't eat during the holidays. It's because of where the chemicals in my brain are. Everything tastes bad. Like, food doesn't taste good. I don't drink during the winter months. I basically stopped drinking after Utopia, and I don't drink again until my birthday. No. A shot here. Like, I don't get trashed on New Year's Eve. I'm not an eggnog girl. Right. I'm not all those things because.
Yeah, it's amateur night.
Really?
Is yours
I used to.
Finn, would you say that was chemical as well?
Oh, I think mine is very, very. Balance seems like the wrong word to use here, but some of it is.
Well, the PTSD, that's obviously situational.
Well, the interesting thing is that if a situation continues for a long time, it affects the way that your body responds and reacts.
Absolutely.
So.
And your body's responses change your brain's responses. That's the thing. Is it's one big cycle.
It's very much a feedback loop.
A lot of times people say, "Oh, but PTSD is completely situational." It's not. Yeah. I mean, it may begin. It may begin as a situational response,
but it embeds itself.
But it changes your brain chemistry.
So yes, absolutely. And are you comfortable talking about what caused the PTSD?
Sure. I've actually had. Multiple compoundings of it. The earliest thing that happened to me was a family member molested me over a prolonged period of time. So there was that, and there was the addition of my caregivers. The person taking care of me found out, and instead of doing something to help end it, because she had also been molested, reacted out of jealousy, and so that I was getting that person's attention. Upset her, and so I received a lot of blame for it.
Yeah.
So that was fairly early on in my life.
Yeah.
And then
so the PTSD, and that settled itself into.
Yeah, it was very much like
preteens.
Before then, like if you know anything about childhood development, like. Yeah, that was a huge part of who I was then. And that relationship with that caregiver, the remainder of my life was, while I was reliant on them, was very not healthy.
Yeah.
And probably in part because of things like that, I had abusive relationships. I was raped when I was 14. In an isolated incident, and then the first relationship I got into after that was in one that was frequently physical in a non-consensual way.
Yeah. And it's even being raped at a young age, that's generally, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that it's consistently correlated with sexual abuse from a younger age. It's like the predators know exactly who they're going after.
There is a correlation. There is no causation.
Absolutely.
There's no way to prove causation. There's not a study you could do that would prove causation with that. There is a correlative. There's correlative as evidence, but it's not very strong, actually. There is some thinking that indicates that it's more that people who have been raped and who were also abused as children are more vocal about it than people who were raped in isolated incidents but didn't have sexual abuse as a child. That they have already put themselves in the position of defending their inner child and being an advocate for their own problems when a rape occurs. And so that then they're even more of an advocate. And so their story gets out more than Betty Jo, sorority girl, who had too many drinks and wound up with three guys in her bed.
Yeah.
She just doesn't tell anybody and goes and moves on with the next thing. So we don't hear about that as much as we hear from people who have had both experiences, because they become self-advocates. If they are dealing with their issues at all, they become self-advocates on some level.
Yeah.
And so they're going to be more vocal. They're going to be more forthcoming about what's happened with them.
So your PTSD, I mean, obviously that's basically it's growing with you. Like it was almost like for lack of a better description, like a parasite that landed in Finn, like pretty much like right away.
Right.
So it's a part of you. It's always been a part of you. The PMM, I mean, that comes later.
Yes.
So is that something
for me 9? So fairly early on as well.
Okay. Now, is that something that's genetic, or is that something that was situational?
There's a difference between genetic and being predisposed.
Okay.
So your Meg probably knows the actual technical words better than I do, but so you're more likely to have it if there's a history of it in your family, but it's not passed down or anything like that.
Yeah, there's not a specific genome that gives you bipolar disorder or depression or PMM, or there's not a specific, like, if your mother had it, you will have it. If your father had it, you might have it. There's none of that. There is an increased likelihood. And again, they're not sure. The studies are not clear. Is that genetic, chemical, biologically based, or is that it's the nature or nurture argument? Yeah. My mother was undiagnosed, but I can tell you flat out, for 100% positive, she was bipolar.
Okay.
we knew she had major depressive episodes. Like, go outside and sit in the rain in your nightgown reading a book, depressive. Like, fucking crazy-ass depressive episodes. Yeah. But she also would, like, throw the casserole in the car and put all the kids in there and drive to Disneyland at 5 o'clock on a Wednesday night.
Yeah.
That's kind of manic.
Yeah.
I grew up in a household with a manic parent and with a depressive parent. So you guys
were always on edge to some extent.
Yeah. I had to take care of my younger brother and sister. This was when there were just 3 of us because Paul and Joy came very late, comparatively. I was pretty young when I would see Mom pick up the Lord of the Rings books and go in her room and close the door. And I would just cook dinner for the next 3 weeks because if I didn't, nobody was gonna.
Yeah.
That started real early in my life, like when I could turn the stove on without lighting the house on fire, basically. I learned to do laundry real early. I learned to step into Mom's place really early on. Because when she would get depressed, she would take her best friends, the Lord of the Rings books, which is why I hate Tolkien. Like, I understand why it's there, but I fucking can't stand that shit. I'm the only nerd on the planet who fucking hates those books. She would take them in her room, she would close the door, and she wouldn't get dressed, she wouldn't come out and bathe, she wouldn't come out and cook, she wouldn't go to church, which, charismatic Catholic freakazoids, and she wouldn't go to church? Yeah. Nothing. She wouldn't do anything except read Lord of the Rings over and over again.
So it's entirely possible that
I learned how to deal with my depression by watching my mother. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and also that you found a way to suppress having to deal with it because you had a sense of responsibility.
Well, I had to do something.
Yeah.
I had to do something, and
I mean that explains your obsession with responsibility, by the way. As long as I know.
Oh, there are lots of things that feed into my obsession with responsibility. I have, like a lot of depressives, and like a lot of girls who grew up on the chunky side of life, like a lot of women who are not a sociological ideal, I have incredibly low self-esteem. Not that you would know that by listening to me run the fuck out of some shit, but I have very low self-esteem. My entire self-worth is based on what am I doing for you? How am I making your life easier? What am I providing? What service am I providing? My entire self-worth is based on that. If I ran out of things, if I was not welcomed to volunteer in the capacity that I do in this community, I wouldn't be here at all in this community. Just because I equate my value as a human being to what level of responsibilities I have.
Yeah,
honestly.
Absolutely.
And I struggle with a very similar thing. My the caregiver that I mentioned actually told me that I was never wanted. That they had tried to abort me, and that I was more trouble than I was worth. And so I found that growing up, I'm constantly struggling to make sure that I am actually worth whatever trouble I know that I'm causing people.
Yeah.
And I have a hard time seeing any of that worth. But I don't struggle at all to see the trouble that I'm causing people. So even now when I'm more aware, and I know that I'm depressive or whatever, and I have to warn people like, oh, I may jump at shadows that aren't even actually there or whatever. I'm aware that I'm putting a strain on those relationships. I see all of that, but I don't see any of the. I really struggle to see the worth that I bring relationships at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We've had exchanges in the past where I've observed that.
Even when Meg asked me, I was like, why? Why would they want me to talk on a podcast? What could I possibly have to offer?
No.
And I told you then, and I'll tell you again now. You are one of the strongest and bravest women I know. And you're willing to sit here and be open and be honest and have your name out there with all of this attached to it, knowing that there are going to be people in our own community who judge. But there's going to be somebody out there who listens to this podcast, who hears what we're saying, and feels understood.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
that's This is for that person. This is not for the three who are going to be like the fuck Finn.
Yeah.
And there's going to be three who are like the fuck Finn, and there's going to be ones who are like, "Are you kidding me, Meg?"
Yeah.
And
that's the ultimate goal. That's the
fine.
ultimate goal of this show, is to show people that they're not alone.
Burner Podcast.
All right, we're going to take a quick little break, and I just wanted to take the break. Normally, we reference like Burner Podcast blog and like other cool events that are happening, but for today's break, I wanted to let some of you guys know that as you're listening to this conversation, it's entirely possible that you're somewhere on your personal growth journey. Perhaps you are already in therapy, but maybe you're not, and maybe you've never really thought about pulling the trigger on that until today's conversation, or maybe, who knows. But I wanted to let you know there are definitely resources for you out there. Producer Meg sent me this amazing list, the list which is going to be uploaded on the Burner Podcast blog that is over at burnerpodcast.com or burnerpodcastblog.com. It should be the latest entry. Our online editor, Tanasi, is putting the full list up. But some of the stuff on that list, and you can Google these, actually. They're pretty easy to find. I'm not gonna read off the whole link, all the links to you, because they're like monster links, because they're, government and like nonprofits and shit. So, but there's the Behavioral Health Services of San Diego County. You can Google that, Behavioral Health Services of San Diego County, or whatever other city you're in. Even in some of the other countries that you might be listening to this on, I'm certain that you have resources that you can reach out to. But if you're in San Diego, there's this one. There's the Adult Emergency and Crisis Services of San Diego County as well. Up to Us San Diego. That's a service that exists here. It includes a live chat internet option, Up to Us. Definitely look that up. There might be a chapter of it in your city as well. Mentalhealth.gov is a national resource that you can go to. Mentalhealth.gov. They do also have resources in Spanish. If somebody is in need of that, I'm assuming you speak English if you listen to this show. The National Suicide Prevention Hotline, that's 1-800-273-8255. Again, that's 800-273-8255. Or go to suicidepreventionlifeline.org. And that's, again, easy to Google as well. The Crisis Call Center, that's also a US-based service. The phone number is 775-784-8090. Again, that's 775-784-8090. The website is crisiscallcenter.org. And you can actually also text them if you prefer to talk via text. Just text to 839-863. Again, that's 839-863. I'm Alive is an online crisis live chat. That's at imalive.org. Of course, with no apostrophe, just imalive.org. Gosh, there's all kinds of services in whatever city you're in whatever other part of the world that you're in. Get on Google, look that up. There are services out there, I promise you. Even if maybe it's not in your country, I'm certain there is in your country if you're listening to this. But if you happen to be listening from Afghanistan, there's probably some resources that you can reach out to via the internet, or you can even call some of these American numbers. I'm sure they'll take you. They're not gonna not talk to you. But of course, in a real mental health, like a real urgent mental health crisis, as with any medical crisis, if the situation is life-threatening, do call 911. You can call that number. Don't worry about it. And of course, the Burner Podcast phone number, if you feel like just calling us and chatting with us, if you have questions for producer Meg or for Finn or for me, if you want to chat, by all means, give us a call. Our number is 858-877-3534. Again, that's 858-877-3534. Let's get back to the show.
Welcome home.
And the reason I was asking those questions about the predisposed versus genetic, by the way, interesting new thing that I learned. I never really thought about it that way. But yeah, I guess I like the subject that really definitely interests me too is also like the difference between those of us that pretty much like came out of the oven with certain things not double checked by Department 4, And those of us...
I do not have the OC sticker.
Yeah. It's like, there might be a recall of like that whole generation of Meg.
Everyone born in March of 1970, get back here.
Yeah, some of us are... I mean, that's one of those things that I've come to in the past few years is... I've grown up battling quite a bit of anxiety and depression. I have molestation in my childhood. The sense of I need to constantly be doing things, the obsession with doing as much as I can. Mm-hmm. The Arash that you see today has gotten to a nice balance of like, hey, how about you like stick to a couple of things and then that's good. You have value there. You don't have to do like the 25 things. So I've been through all of this. And one of the things that I've come to in the most recent chapter of my personal development is the acceptance that for me, it wasn't like, I don't know if there was a predisposition or a genetic thing there.
Right.
For me, I'm looking back on my upbringing and it was a lot of it, like the majority of it was environmental. My dad definitely battles mental health issues. I don't know what, but one of the things I'm fairly certain of is that I've been active in the intellectual giftedness community, and I'm certain he's gifted. And so for listeners who are not familiar, like a lot of times like gifted people don't like to talk about it because it makes it sound like we're bragging and because of the title, like, oh, you're gifted, go fuck yourself. Like, what are you so special? Like, but it's not. It's like, and there has actually been discussion in the community of like, can we change this name? Because
because for fuck's sake, it never helped. The whole Hi, San Diego Unified School District. At no point from the time I was in third grade till the time I graduated high school did being gifted help me.
Yeah.
Okay? Because fuck you. Because I wasn't living up to my potential every time I turned around.
I describe it to people as actually like genetic, like when you're looking at the genetics of it, it might actually be closer to autism than it is to like something else.
Like, yeah, fuck, okay, whatever, I'm smart.
Yeah.
Well, that's why
I learn well.
A lot of people now think of those sorts of things as being neurally diverse.
Neurodiversity, yeah. That's my nephew's autistic, so that's where I became familiar with the term neurodiversity.
Right.
The idea that it's not like this is right, this is wrong. It's
this is this.
Yeah, there is the norm, and that's again like people like get upset about like the word normal. Like all that means is the norm. This is
a set data that is overall the mean.
That which is the median.
Yes, and that's sort of like the majority of the human populations agree. Well, they agreed before they came out of the womb that this is the way they're going to operate, and then some of us don't operate the same way. It doesn't mean that it's less than or better than. It's just it's different.
It's other.
Well, I mean, I like to think of it as bananas. Like
bananas.
It's bananas. BANANAS.
Bananas. It is very bad for things to all work the same way or all be exactly the same, because then if there's a blight, it affects them all. Whereas when there's greater diversity, that produces strength.
Yeah.
So I try not to think, and I struggle with this as applied to myself, but in a general case, I try not to think of these things like bipolar or anxiety, OCD, stuff like that, which OCD for me is not a primary diagnosis. It's one of my coping mechanisms to dealing with the post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But those are all things that mean that because it causes me to think differently about the world and how I interact with it. And that can be a strength. And that will help the community either, on a small scale like San Diego Burners, or even larger than if we all thought exactly the same.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. We sell, that's the thing. That's one of those things before we started recording the first episode of Burner Podcast, one of the various formats that I was playing with was having like this like very like written poetic opening. And I remember as the recordings are sitting around somewhere, and one of them was, and I was like, oh God, and I listened to myself, I'm like, fuck, this is pretentious as fuck, like I don't want this. So, but like one of the things that I did write about on one of those was that in our community we don't tolerate you, we celebrate you. That's a big thing. That's a huge thing. That's
I think we at least try.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, some of us still have our own, some of our own baggage.
There's a few people I'm not celebrating and who are not celebrating me, and that's cool.
Sure.
That's part of the diversity of this community is that we're allowed to not celebrate one another.
But your weirdness is celebrated. Like your OCD, awesome. Let's put you to task on this thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, I think
OCD, get on this map, Finn.
Yeah, and I think there are ways in which people behave. Like very chaotic artistic people have roles that they can play in our community, and people who are very like linear thinking have roles that they can play, and so on and so forth. There's lots of roles, and some they fit others better, and so there's always a place for you.
Totally.
Absolutely.
And so we started to go down like the OCD path, but the subject that we were just discussing though about like, for lack of a better description, the difference between how you came out of the oven versus what seasoning was added to you after you were placed on the table. Right. And the reason that subject I think is very important to our community is because, and going back to sort of what I was describing about looking at my own upbringing and seeing where I've gotten to now, I was obsessed with the idea of not getting on medication. I don't know why. I had this thing, I don't know, it's a giftedness thought process, it's an OCD thing, whatever it is, where like I feel like whatever I do, immediately my mind would jump into, then I have to do this for the next 50 years. And so one of those things was medication.
What up, absolutist?
Yeah. So one of those things was medication. I was like, I don't ever want to get on medication because the idea of potentially always taking medication terrified me. Even though a psychiatrist was like, no, you're on a cycle and then you get off. But I couldn't accept that. So I became,
welcome to that's not how it works, but okay.
Yeah. So either way, I became obsessed with that idea. And I am one of those people who came from that place of regularly contemplating suicide to the level of happiness and peace that I'm at now. And I did that without medication. And I'm fully aware that that's not something that is possible for everybody. And so in our community, the reason that this is an interesting and important subject for us is that we have a lot of fucking hippies who will sit there and describe to you with absolute certainty that you just need to align your chakras and then like, you're good to go, man. Like, yeah, your thoughts, like that's, you fix that and you'll be good to go. we're not gonna get into a discussion of like the wisdom of our elders right now and like the different ways we're interpreting that with modern day science, et cetera, et cetera. We're looking at just today. This particular episode is about mental health and psychology, so we're gonna stick to today. Listeners,
we'll have some chakra alignment next time.
Yeah. No, and full disclosure, I am fully with you about like the greater oneness and all that awesome shit. But I am walking around in 2015 and I have mental health problems and I'm trying to figure out if I should be getting on medication or if I really need to just maybe get my ass out there and jog a little bit. And I think that there is a difference.
The answer is yes.
Yeah, yes to all of them. So
the answer is yes.
There is no one size fits all.
Exactly. But in the greater society, and this is the reason again why this is interesting to me, we are over medicating the fuck out of our citizens. Like, I don't think this part is too much up for debate. Like we have a society that's like super into it, and there are a lot of people that absolutely should, like present company, like medication absolutely is necessary for some of the things that we're dealing with. And then we do have a lot of people that really could just is not the correct word. That I know. The word just is not the correct word. But we do have a lot of people who could navigate the road of not taking medication and perhaps like approaching it from various other angles. And that would be better for them rather than for those of us who have chemical things that we really need to work on. So the question is, how do we work on those?
For what it's worth, I haven't taken medication for any of my issues since for about a year. So when I was diagnosed with a bunch of stuff in 2001, I took something. I was on some things then. A variety of things, because rarely the first thing
it's almost never like, hey, here's the pill that will fix you. I, as a matter of fact, only take one psychotropic medication at this point. I take Wellbutrin for my depression. It's an SSRI. I used to take Abilify for my manic periods. I no longer medicate my manic periods. I strictly utilize cognitive behavioral therapy techniques. Why? It works better. To be perfectly honest, Abilify is a wonderful atypical psychiatric medication that levels out mania remarkably well. But it, for me, left me feeling bland. I was very level. I wasn't making manic decision process mistakes in my life, but I felt very bland. Like, plain spaghetti noodles with nothing on them. Cognitive behavioral therapy allows me to maintain flavor without throwing ghost peppers in my sauce and going fucking crazy. It doesn't work as well for depression. Depression, the chemical process in my brain, in my brain, not necessarily in anybody else's brain, is so intense that without Wellbutrin during the winter months, I would okay. I am alive because I have children. Literally, there have been winters, including this one, actually. This has been really bad. This has been a fucked up year. Where if I didn't know that I needed to make sure Bridget got up and went to school, I'd just go jump onto the freeway from the overpass that's a block from my house. I would. I would. But I have kids. And because I have kids, I shovel SSRIs into my face and I feel bland. I don't feel like me. But I don't jump off the bridge onto the 94 either. So, yeah, that's... If cognitive behavioral therapy worked the same way Wellbutrin does, then I would probably not take Wellbutrin either. But it doesn't, or it hasn't so far. And, yeah, I've only been doing this shit 10 years. So, maybe I'm not that good at it yet. Maybe I'm not as dedicated to not being depressed as I am to doing all the things during the cool months. I am...
There's a complex ecosystem inside of all of us.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And sometimes we do some good, and it's overwhelmingly good, but it can have some negative repercussions, and vice versa.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. Can I ask the one that you stopped taking?
Abilify?
This is obviously totally a guess answer, but do you think having been on it could have potentially given you a frame of reference for deciding to not be on it?
Oh, absolutely. I would not have...
Let me just clarify for the listeners if that didn't make sense. Like, the fact that you were on it for a period of time was what gave you the strength to decide you're going to do it on your own.
Yes. Absolutely. Because you do know. Like, it's not like it wipes your memory of how you felt before you felt not like killing yourself or whatever. It doesn't change your memory. You don't forget how you were the first 30 years of your life or whatever. Yeah. For me on Abilify, like, okay, maybe this isn't a guy thing. I don't know. I don't have a penis, but Finn will probably be able to relate to me.
Finn is a penis.
Sometimes you can have an orgasm and it's eh. And sometimes you have an orgasm and it's like, I just punched a hole in the wall. Okay?
Yeah.
So Abilify, they're all eh. Oh. There's no wall punching. There's no, holy shit, I just got hit by a freight train orgasm. There's like, woohoo.
Yeah.
What should I make for breakfast? It's like literally you can have an orgasm and get up and collect the laundry. Yeah. Like there's no refractory period for that was awesome. That's what Abilify. That's the level of meh that Abilify was for me. And I'm a reasonably sexual person. I'm not, actually. There are people in my past who will tell you I'm super not reasonable about my sexuality. I'm a demanding bitch.
That's often part of bipolar disorder.
Bitch, this is how this is going to work. And let me tell you. No. Yeah, actually, it is often a part of bipolar disorder. Control issues are often a part of bipolar disorder. Go figure, let's define all of Meg's life based on her disability. Oh, that's what I try not to do, actually.
Finn, what was the medication that you were on?
I don't actually. We switched frequently. I was on Prozac for a little bit and Zoloft for a little bit, and
This was to deal with the PTSD.
this was to deal with the. No, you typically don't medicate for
PTSD.
right. You medicate for depression.
Okay.
But the depression was, which I determined through talk therapy, was part of dealing with the depression. So it's like you're looking at
The depression was a part of dealing with the PTSD.
Yes, sorry, yeah. So, and in fact, when I went into talk therapy, I did not remember that the molestation had happened.
Wow.
I had this vague sense, and the first time I attempted to kill myself was right after that family member died. And I had so much guilt because of the jealousy issue with the other family member that I had blocked it out. So it was through dealing with the depression from that divorce that the post-traumatic stress disorder became a thing that I was aware of.
Interesting.
But when I was on those medicines, I described it as feeling as if my soul had been scooped out. I did not produce any art in any medium for about 8 months. And by the end of that 8 months, I was like, I am in a far deeper depression now. Like, I was sobbing constantly because I felt like I was no longer myself anymore. Mm-hmm. Because I hadn't produced art for 8 months.
Yeah.
So my therapist and I decided that to give up at that point. In terms of keep trying new medication. Because over that time I had tried multiple medications.
Most people go through 2 or 3 different medications when they're initially diagnosed, because it's a balancing game to find the one that gives you the most benefit with the fewest side effects and detractions from it. And different people are willing to put up with different side effects.
Yeah.
I've talked to a lot of people who say, like, Wellbutrin gives them, like, reduces their sex drive and makes them less wanting to jump into bed, and I'm okay with that. It's true, but I'm okay with it.
Finn, how was your sex drive?
For me,
I'm okay with that.
For me, it also affected my sex drive negatively, but that feels very part and parcel to me with expressing myself artistically. For me, sex is very, very similar. I have high drives to do both when things are going well. And this was not just low drive, this was no drive to express myself in any way, both artistically and sexually. And that literally felt like it was just the case of Finn walking around. There was no actual, what makes Finn left anymore.
So is that why you decided to stop?
Yes.
What was that decision-making process like?
With my therapist. We discussed whether we should continue to try new or different classes of things, because different things work differently. And at the time, I had a good support system. I had multiple very healthy relationships that were at that time healthy. Yeah. And we felt that together we could all, my therapist and those people and I, all work together to deal with it without medicine. And though none of those relationships ended up going well, they went very, very bad. I do feel like those people were also helped me to positively deal with some of the stuff that I struggle with from an internal perspective, like cognitive behavioral therapy does, without medicine.
Yeah, so the question is, when those relationships were no longer there as a part of your system, did you consider returning to the medication?
No, because for me, those medicines had such a negative impact. I mean, they helped from a positive perspective. It's like one of those things, like, I no longer wanted to kill myself initially, but I no longer wanted to do anything. Yeah. And that deepened my depression to the point where I was just always like, there's no point in my actual existence.
Yeah.
Which felt like a deeper, more pervasive problem than anytime I've had suicidal ideation. Even in that moment, I am aware that it is temporary. It almost feels like I have synesthesia as well, so it feels very sharp. And
clarify for the listeners what that is.
Oh, synesthesia is when you mess up senses. So colors may have a taste or a texture. Music has a feel.
Yeah.
That sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I often end up thinking in analogies. So for me, that kind of the clarity that comes from the clarity that is present with suicidal ideation is very, very sharp and like a needle poke. Whereas the depression that I had with that medicine was like a bottomless pit. It was like a gaping abscess. Like there was just no substance to me then. Yeah. And I would far rather deal with occasional pinpricks than gaping open wounds.
Yeah.
So.
Because it's almost like it's a... I'm not quite at that level of badassery, but we do have badasses who would argue that's good because it's like a reminder you're alive, dive into the anxiety. Which, I mean, it kind of sounds like it's kind of the conclusion you came to.
No, but you're getting something totally different out of it than I am.
What am I getting?
You're projecting. To use the correct psychological term, because you felt that medications were not the appropriate way to deal with it, you are projecting onto Finn the same motivation to not take the drugs, which may not actually be what her motivation was. You're projecting your own...
What is the motivation? Where did I misunderstand it?
What I got from what Finn was saying was that it wasn't the result she wanted. Which is, it wasn't that it didn't have a result. It wasn't that it didn't aid her in getting to a different place, but that she wasn't able to live continuously under the feeling that gave her, which is actually the reason that most people go off their psych meds. Most people go off their psych meds because they feel better.
Yeah.
Schizophrenics are notorious for, I don't hear the voices anymore. I don't need the drugs.
Yeah.
They stop taking the drugs. A week later, they're hearing the voices again. Most people who are diagnosed with a mental health disorder go off their meds at least once in the course of their life. Some do it because they have a long conversation with their therapist and come to the conclusion that there are better ways for them to deal.
Okay, so let me clarify here so I can understand correctly. Sure. You haven't been on medication since then?
No.
You decided...
not a psychotrope.
Okay.
I have chronic pain disorders, so I've been on medications for that.
Okay, well today we're talking about mental health. Though,
right.
We don't care about your pain.
It's interesting because it's comorbid, because people often who have chronic physical pain, you're pretty likely to also suffer from depression because
Actually,
shitty
there are
situation.
physical manifestations of depression.
Yeah.
Depression, when they say depression hurts, it actually does. It physically causes you pain.
Absolutely, absolutely. Before you guys came over, I was physically winded, like I was having difficulty breathing.
Difficulty breathing, frequently upset stomach, headaches.
There was so option A was I continue taking medication, but I also can't create art and can't come as well. Option B...
And have no interest in it.
Yes, no interest in coming or creating art, which I pull myself just from that. And then option B was I don't take the medication and I deal with some shit, but ultimately I continue to feel a drive to be alive.
Yes. Yeah,
I mean, that's what I understood.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So,
and I also saw, within that, I saw the potential to use the negative as a positive, because, like, in the example of when I was raped, for a while I worked a crisis hotline, and we were doing, like, a group bonding exercise amongst the workers, and we were talking about regrets and what we would take back or whatever, and I was like, I would absolutely not, if I could go back in time and not be raped, I would not do that.
Yeah.
Because as terrible as it's
a part of who you are.
It's a part of who I am, and it helps me to relate to people who have had similar situations, and it has now become... I'm not saying rape is ever a positive thing, but how I've internalized that and let it affect how I deal with the world has become a positive thing.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
all of our traumas and our upbringings make us who we are.
Exactly.
Yeah. So...
But the strength to... And this is why... And I know she disregards when I say this is why I look at Finn and be like... Fucking hell, you're strong. You're strong like the fucking base of the Golden Gate Bridge strong. Like, you can hold your shit. Not everybody can do that. No. Some people have to take those meds, even if it makes them feel like that, because there is no way they can take those traumas and they can take those ideations and they can take those voices in their head that are grinding them down and turn them into something that supports them. There's a lot of people who there's no way they can do that. Or there's no way they can do that at first.
Right.
Or there's no way they can do that without extensive therapy. And let's face it, in this country, most people can't afford extensive therapy.
That's right.
Therapy is fucking expensive. Most insurance policies will cover like 8 visits a year to a therapist for 45 minutes at a time.
And that's it, even if they get there.
And that's, yeah.
There's a lot of stigma about it.
Yeah.
And I think there's stigma about taking medication as well, which is why I try and avoid
oh my God.
using stuff like, I don't think I'm strong just because I have managed the level of functionality, which is, I don't want to paint a rosy picture. Like, I could be a lot more functional.
Yeah.
But I have not managed the level of functionality that I have without medication because I'm stronger than someone who has to rely on medication.
No, you have a different kind of strength. You have a strength to take those things and utilize them in a way that allows you to function, that allows you to become more the person you want to be. If I don't take my psych meds when I'm depressed, I do not get out of my bed. I do not shower. Like, literally, the only reason I took a shower today is because I was like, I'm going to go sit in a closed room with Arash and Finn.
Oh, thank God.
I'm going to stink really bad.
I put on socks
bathe.
because my feet were, like, super stinky before you guys walked in. And that's why I burned sage.
Aww. Literally, the only reason I bathed today is because I knew I was going to be sitting in a closed room with the two of you and didn't want to put you guys through it.
Well, we're happy you're considering.
If I don't take those meds during this period of my this portion of my year, I'm not functional. Right. And I'm strong enough to know that I need to fucking take the pills.
Right.
So now...
I don't like them.
Yeah.
But
here's the thing, and I should clarify, of course, again, this subject is really, I think, interesting, especially to our community, because, full disclosure, I am not, by any stretch of the imagination, anti-medication. I know it seems like it because of all the love and light bullshit, but no, like, I do believe that... we have way too many fucking people on this planet to have a one-size-fits-all approach to everybody.
Right.
Everybody's got different shit we need to deal with.
So it's like love, light, and lithium.
Yes.
Fuck yeah.
That's our
Excellent.
that's our
That's
tagline.
the tagline.
That's the name
Love,
of this
light,
episode.
and
Love,
lithium.
light, and lithium. There
Excellent.
it is. So but we do have a lot of people there. What can we call it? What medication shaming? That exists.
The strong
It
sort
does.
of homeopathy kind
Yeah.
of like
Yeah.
Well, and just the mental health issues are not seen as an illness. They're not seen as a disease.
In general, or in our
in
community?
general, in our society.
Yeah.
And everyone in our community is a product of our society, regardless of how hippie and fucking freaky they are.
Yeah.
They're still a product of our society. We live in a world where it's beyond acceptable. It's actually weird to not. Like, if you've got cancer and they tell you to get chemo, if you choose not to take the chemo, you're weird. People they'll take kids away from their parents for that bullshit.
Yeah.
But same family, guy's depressed, you're going to tell him to buck up.
Yeah.
It's not, yes, depression's not cancer.
You can't
Depression's
physically
not
go
cancer.
into the brain and see the
Yes, you can.
thing that's
You absolutely can if you have a PET,
with
have a PET
machines,
scan.
but Meg,
You absolutely can. It's beautiful.
The point is, like, I can't rip your skull open and then like tell people around me like, oh look, she's hurting
She's
in this
depression
lobe
right here.
Yeah.
Well, you could, but they'd put you in jail, and that's not really good for anybody.
And so, but that's the reason, though.
But
that
it
most
is a
people
disease.
Don't get it. That people don't see it as a disease. They don't see it. But the thing is, the brain is very much a muscle, and you can work out certain parts of it. I'm not even talking about mental health issues at this point. Just even
just in general.
If you, I have I'm a person of note in the hip hop community, and like that's something that like rappers that I see they'll write songs in their heads, and then they're immediately memorized, and they can get out there and perform it within like minutes. Jay-Z doesn't actually write down his raps. Did you know that?
oh my gosh.
No, that's all in his head. He writes it in the
I
studio
can't
in his
even
head.
remember what I ate for lunch.
I know, but that's the part of his brain that he's
Right.
worked out.
Wow.
And it is a muscle. You can work it out. And the same kind of thing, I think, of course, exists with like a disease.
Yeah.
As you're describing.
It's just it's one of those things. There's a stigma in our society that if it's the same stigma that led to the war on drugs. If you're an addict, it's because you lack the Protestant foundation of this country. You lack willpower. You lack the ability to know right from wrong. And that mental health is the same thing. You lack willpower. You lack the strength, the fortitude to not be sad.
Yeah.
It's the Protestant work ethic that this country was based on. That God shows his favor. This is sociology
Right.
207. God shows his favor and his favored people by elevating them. If you are successful, it's because God favors you. That's why it's good to be rich. That's why capitalism is an awesome thing. This is a Protestant work ethic. It's the same thing that tells you that if you can't pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, you're doing it wrong. You're not trying hard enough.
I should point out, as a metaphor, as someone who thinks very visually or whatever, I mean, consider that. How absurd is that image? Yeah. Can you actually pull yourself up by your bootstraps? Yeah. No. So
yeah.
No, but it's
the same way that financially and economically some of us have advantages from birth. The same thing that we have with mental health. I look on my upbringing. In my childhood, it was promoted to always like ask a lot of questions, spend a lot of time researching things. My dad, being that he dealt with, he was violent towards my mom, but my mom, for whatever reason, like she was strong enough to deal with it in terms of explaining to me that my dad has mental health problems and that I should not really see it as him as an evil person, that he's hurt, he's in pain. So having that as a frame, like all that trauma in my childhood was what led to me being able to deal with some of these things in a way that somebody else who didn't have access to some of the resources that the three of us had in this room. Let's say you live in a home where, the answer is buck up. And you know what? It's not even buck up. It's you better shut the fuck up if I hear you cry again. And that exists in a lot of our communities. Yeah. It doesn't even have to be poor or rich. It's across the board.
It's just everywhere.
And they never even think, hey, the option exists that I can go get help.
Right.
And so that wound festers and becomes a disease that ends up being passed down to other generations beyond them.
So that's actually how I was raised. My family was very much like they were concerned that if we ever spoke to anybody, agencies would be involved.
Yeah.
And rightfully so.
Rightfully so.
Apparently.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's actually why I wanted to get into psychiatry as well. When I went to college, I did early education and child development, and as well as art. At the time, because I'm so old, at the time when I was in college, there was not an art therapy degree, and so I was basically trying to create for myself that sort of background and resume. But the reason I wanted to, and it's the reason a lot of people get into psychiatry, is because they're looking for answers to heal themselves.
Yeah.
Oh,
Most
absolutely.
psych major girls I go on dates on, usually.
We're a pile of nuts.
Yeah.
So yeah, I in my case, I was absolutely not given those sort of skills.
So you're just furthering, by the way, giving evidence to what Meg was saying about you being ridiculously strong and like.
Right, thank you.
Like that's pretty.
Thank you. See, whereas I grew up in a family where we were in family therapy all the time, like my whole life, really. We were encouraged to talk about our feelings and go in, although frequently it was, you should talk to the priest about this, because I was raised very Catholic, and you're supposed to take everything to the priest because God will tell you how to fix your shit through the dude.
The dude.
Because the dude totally gets me, right?
The dude
Yeah,
abides,
thanks.
Last night.
I've never watched that movie, God damn it. I've never seen.
Tolkien, fuck.
No, I've never seen The Big Lebowski.
Last night, my panic had gotten so bad that I took a handful of pills that a friend at work had given me, which it was just, I think, muscle relaxers, anti-anxiety, and I liked having some of these around when I went through my breakup. My major breakup like 5 years ago, because I was like falling apart, and when I was falling apart I would just pop one of these and just feel better. This time around, being that I've gotten to like where I'm at in my current general stability and spiritual understanding of the world, the experience that I had when I took the pill and I really hated it was it was similar to what you're describing, but it was like much more subtle. And
it wasn't at therapeutic doses.
Yeah, because I'm just going to tell you this from a professional standpoint. Taking a handful of pills, psychotropic, psychiatric medications, once or twice, you didn't get any benefit from them. You got zero therapeutic benefit from those medications. Yeah. You might have gotten a little, you felt a thing, something, but you got zero therapeutic benefit.
Yeah.
Most psychotropic medications, most psychiatric meds, you have to be taking them, and you start at a very low dose and you gradually increase, and it's over a period of weeks before it's even in your system.
So yeah,
I started taking Wellbutrin well before Utopia because I knew I was going to need it afterwards.
Well, you're describing, I've had that conversation with multiple people, and yet I've had 3 different chapters in my life.
Placebo effect.
Yeah, and somehow the placebo effect is quite that powerful.
The placebo effect is incredibly powerful.
And also consider that some people are more sensitive or whatever. I had a problem where one of the drugs that we tried often gave you the box of rocks feeling, and I felt it as it was ramping up, and I talked to my therapist about it, and my therapist was all on board with it, but therapists don't prescribe, psychiatrists do. Mm-hmm. And the psychiatrist was like, there's no possible way you're feeling this. It's not at therapeutic levels. And I was like, perhaps I just have a very high drug dexterity. Yeah. So,
Yeah, and that is the experience that I've had multiple times. It's not so intense where I'm all of a sudden like, cool. But it definitely like calms some of the energies. But then I will, and this is for the hippie listeners, you two are not gonna. I feel like you're gonna make fun of me about this. But I do almost feel never make fun of you. You're super make fun of me about this. I feel this connection to the oneness.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am making fun of you.
No, that totally makes sense. Totally makes sense to me.
That feeling goes away. I feel like I'm completely in my body, and like it doesn't hurt as much, but I'm super here. Right. And so going back to like your experiences with your medications, and it's almost like it kind of created a frame of reference for you. Like, this is what it feels like to be on it. This is what it feels like to not be on it.
How do I find a place that doesn't suck?
Yeah. For now, I'm going to choose this one here where I'm not on it because this other one sucks more than this. The frame of reference approach, and this is just kind of an interesting observation that I've had over time with like psychedelics. I think that's one of the major reasons why people get these profound epiphanies on psychedelic experiences, because it's giving you this dramatic opposite example of what it can all feel like. Mm-hmm. And then you snap back into reality and you still remember. So really,
I can see that.
Yeah.
The thing you're describing, though, where you talk about, I happen to have these pills that a coworker gave to me, and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
It's called self-medication, and it is one of the biggest problems with the stigmas that surround mental health. Because the most common way to self-medicate is street drugs. Mm-hmm. It's why there's such a high correlation, in my opinion, and in some of the studies I've looked at, it supports that, is that there are specific drugs that you can take on a recreational basis that create a false sense of normalcy in you. I know lots of people who like ketamine as a recreational drug. It's actually being used experimentally for depression treatment in people who are resistant to traditional depression medications. So far, with some interesting results that are encouraging further study, because it makes everything seem a little lighter. And you talk to people who are on K for recreational purposes, and they talk about how, everything feels a little shiny, feels a little fuzzy, feels a little... Well, that's better than depressed. That's better than everything feels dark and gloomy and the raptors are going to eat my eyes. It's
typically like people with anxiety seem to be like described as having really positive experiences with ketamine as being like their party drug of choice.
I have noticed that, not causation, that I've heard anecdotally similar things, that people who feel like they have anxiety issues or who have been diagnosed as having anxiety issues,
but go back to what you were describing.
Prefer light hallucinogens.
Yeah. Go back to what you were describing about the self-medicating.
Okay, so you have to remember that regardless of what our community thinks, feels, and does, the general society that surrounds us still perceives recreational drug use as bad. Mm-hmm. Like, dare bad, like Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan bad.
Yeah.
It is perceived as a negative trait, period. There is no positivity. There's nothing good that comes of recreational drug use. That is the general consensus of our culture. That may be changing, and certainly in our community and communities like ours, there's a different perspective. But so when I've had this problem going through school where I will speak positively about people's ability to relax using ecstasy or ketamine, or, like you go to a thing and these people are taking this and here's this. And I've had professors and classmates get on my ass. I mean, like, you can't ever say that that's cool once you have a license. Mm-hmm. You can't ever talk about how moderate usage is cool. You can't do that. And I'm like, oh, no, actually you can. I've read through all of the stuff, and it's not against the law to say that I'm not here to talk to you about your drug use, unless you're an addict and it's creating addictive problems in your life. But if you go because you're having symptoms and you go into a clinic to talk to them about the voices that you're hearing, the first fucking thing they ask you on the fucking on the entry paperwork, when they're processing you, is they ask what drugs are on. They ask what you've been taking. And if you write anything there, they dismiss your mental health issue and only look at the drug issue. Mm. And so our tendency as humans to try and mitigate our own symptoms through whatever mechanism doesn't serve us well when we're trying to reduce the stigma of mental health, because we're adding other stigmas on top of to our already stigmatized selves. So when my friend X, who is depressed, goes and gets a prescription from the green pharmacy because that's how he deals with his depression, then when he has to go to the ER because he's having an episode and he's standing on a bridge and they find that much pot in his system, they're not dealing with his depression anymore. They're dealing with his addiction because that's the only thing they can see. They have to do that first. And then it becomes this stigma. Well, of course you're depressed. You're a fucking drug user. Of course you're a drug user. It all ties together that way.
It's an easy scapegoat.
And we scapegoat one another. We scapegoat ourselves. And so when we self-medicate, when we self-medicate with methods or substances that are not currently legal or that are not in our possession in a legal fashion. So your friend's prescription medications or the shit you picked up from your local chemist or any of those things, the stuff you grew in your backyard. When you self-medicate in fashions that are considered illegal, considered immoral, considered unethical, you just add to the stigma. If it becomes public, if it becomes out there, if it becomes part of the conversation about you and about mental health, you've added to the stigma. The problem is that most people are so frightened of that label that they're not going to go see a doctor first. The first thing they're going to do is, I heard yoga helps.
Yeah.
I heard yoga helps with depression, so I'm going to do a whole fucking shit ton of yoga.
So I'm trying to understand this here. So the for lack of a better word, the blame goes on the people that are self-medicating, in your opinion?
It does. It's not my opinion. I've watched it happen over and over again. I've watched it happen to me. I literally, until I became part of this community, didn't do drugs. I drank, which is my own self-medication thing, although I do it differently now. I didn't do illicit drugs at all. Like, all of that is in the past 4 years. All of my experience with that is since my diagnosis.
I want to go back to
But when I went in to be diagnosed, they asked me repeatedly, not just on the first entry forms, in the first 3 entry interviews, repeatedly. They couldn't believe I wasn't on something.
Because, okay, so the guy that's on the bridge with the marijuana issue. So I'm trying to understand this here. So your stance on that is that I'm trying to understand this here.
Well, she wasn't describing her stance.
Sure.
She was describing what she sees as society's
I was describing what's going to happen when he goes to the ER, basically.
But here's the thing, though. I hear that story, so that makes sense. I hear that story, though, and what that sounds to me like, that's a problem with the system, not with the individual.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, that's why...
To me, that feels like kind of victim blaming. In that.
It is. But we all aid it to a certain extent. Because we make passing jokes, and we've all seen it, like on Facebook, on whatever, and somebody will post a thing about somebody lost their shit at this thing, and there'll be like 12 jokes about the drugs, and then one serious comment about like, has he seen a doctor?
Yeah. See, so
there's the 12 comments about the drugs and the whatever, and it's none of us are helping with the stigma and the stereotype and the image that mental health and mental health disorders have in our society.
Yeah, and so I feel like the answer to that, though, in my opinion, is that we need to get more people like you into those positions so you can help remove some of those stigmas rather than looking at the individuals who are trying to just operate and live
That's
their
actually
life.
the research I want to do.
Yeah.
That's the research I want to do, is I want to find the correlations between specific drugs of choice and specific disorders, because I think that there is a lot to be understood in why this drug is being chosen by this type of mental health disorder. What are the effects of this drug? What are the physical effects and the psychological effects that taking this drug has on, say, a depressed person, that we can then mitigate the use of that particular drug by mimicking its effects on your body and your mind through other therapeutic methods, so that we can take and pull the two stigmas apart, but recognize the value of the attempts at self-medication in the treatment of mental health disorder.
I think also, by the way, I've talked about this on previous shows, but my general opinion on where we're going as a society is we are getting more and more people from our communities and from our circles and from our generations coming into positions of power. So I think that little by little, those stigmas are already starting to move. I think they're already starting to fade because you're getting more and more people that are coming up as like executives at Google. Mm-hmm. And really, they're the decision makers. Our politicians or senators, they're responding to the business names. But you get more and more people that are at that level of power that are telling the world, like, hey, I smoke DMT and my life is a million times better. And he has a Schedule I substance. So let's go ahead and change some of the stigma about drugs. All drugs bad. And I feel like that we are generally moving in that direction.
We are. Partially because we created an unsustainable model when we created the schedule system and the criminalization of all recreational drugs in this country. We created a model that was inevitably going to implode. That there was no way that you could enforce the kinds of laws and rules and regulations that we were establishing.
Yeah. It was a nice run, though.
Hey, it
was a nice.
Good on you, full jails.
Finn, can I ask you a question? You came into the San Diego community like about 5 years?
4?
Also, you should quit smoking, by the way.
I should, but I haven't yet.
Listeners.
I have not quit smoking.
But this episode is about mental health.
Well, I mean,
that's it contributes to my... I'm self-medicating the fuck out of myself with a cigarette. Are you kidding me? This is how I don't kill you.
Yeah.
Is by smoking.
Can I tell you, by the way, like, my last cigarette was burn night.
Yeah, you told me that.
She told me that when we were coming.
When they dropped.
Yeah, that's awesome. Congratulations.
It's been stupid easy.
Fuck you.
Well,
just fuck you.
Yeah.
I know. It's been like
just
like
fuck you.
Silly easy.
Perhaps it was a coping mechanism, and you have outgrown whatever that was serving.
Yeah, I got more into like cardio and stuff, and then like, ooh, breathing's fun.
What up?
But you came into San Diego. How many years has it been?
I think about 4.
It's been about 4 years.
4. Because we talked about like you came out here, and then you discovered sort of like the burn community 4. And now you're like fully entrenched. Like this is it. Like you're.
I still have trouble coping with that. Like there are times when I went to a meeting and someone said, "How many of you are burners?" And I didn't raise my hand, and the person I was with was like,
"What meeting?" Oh, I'm sorry.
Sure. Not related to burners.
Not related to burners. Okay.
But a fair amount of them were burners.
Gotcha.
And I didn't raise my hand, and the person I was with was like, I don't know how to articulate verbally what the face that I just made, but like, what?
Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah, I definitely don't go and like tell somebody like, "Hi, I'm Arash, I'm a burner." But like if they ask like, "Hey, that guy's a burner," I'm like, yeah, whatever.
It wasn't so much that, but like I don't. There was enough of them burners that I wasn't worried about, biases or whatever. It was that I undervalue my position in the community so much so that I don't.
Yeah. You don't even have to actually do shit to get that title, you know that?
Apparently, yeah. But
you just like show up.
Yeah, I guess.
Burner. I guess my question was that just even like coming into the community, I'm wondering how that's affected your general sense of happiness and how you deal with depression and PMM and all that good stuff.
I think that because burners as a whole are very welcoming and to the other. One of the principles is we welcome the stranger, part of that. I
fucking hate that one. It's my least favorite principle. Fuck radical inclusion. Fuck that thing.
But it's meant that I have a better understanding that though I fall outside of some of the brackets of normal range, people overall will be accepting of it, or at least attempt to be tolerant of it. I recently made the analogy to a friend of mine that, like, you don't walk into someone's house and shit on their carpet, but there is an understanding that sometimes we are sick and can't help it, and we'll accidentally shit in the bed, and that we can help one another with those.
You'll give me like a heads up if you do that, though, right?
I'm just trying to run your analogy through my head now.
There's a difference between like just walking in and doing it, or you know what I mean. But sorry, the whole point is that there sometimes things happen, and that's okay, and we try and help one another out, because today it's me, but tomorrow. Wait, no. Today it's you, but tomorrow it's me. So, there's an understanding that, like, you'll if I'm going through a rough period, I can reach out to you and you'll help me, and I can trust that, because there's a likelihood that at some other point, that's been paid forward in some other way.
Yeah. And that actually leads to the question that I do have for both of you. Do you feel any effects from your experiences in this community and having been to the burn on sort of generally where you're at right now? Like even the burn itself, like do you think that affected at all your processing of mental health issues?
Oh, my very first burn came at like a hugely transformative time in my life. I think my depression had been so bad previous to that burn that I kept a note in my phone of the people that I believed would miss me if I killed myself. And something had happened that had meant I had 3 people that I still, even in that bad of a depressive episode, I felt those 3 people would do so. And something happened that caused me to remove 2 of them. And then I got sort of very, very involved in a project that went to the burn. And it became immediately obvious that there was vastly more than 3 people that would be on that list. And today I don't need to keep such a list. I
remember being pissed at you that I wasn't on your list. I remember we talked about this, because our first burn was together. We had our first burn together.
Yes.
And I remember being fucking mad at you and yelling at you about, like, the fuck, why my name is not on this list? What the hell, woman? I remember that part.
That's totally something I'm going to use in, like, a script at some point. It's pretty funny. Why not on your list?
There are a lot of people who, I mean, like, and it's difficult. It's like the thing we were talking about at the very beginning, where people are uncomfortable dealing with what you're sharing with them. It's uncomfortable for people to know that my depression is that deep, that I struggle to understand how important I am to them.
Nobody wants to hear that you are not sure you should be alive. Nobody wants to hear that, ever.
There was a time when I was struggling, and a friend of mine said, I hope you know that I would miss you if you were no longer here. And in a moment of immense honesty and perhaps bluntness, I was like, no, I don't know that. And it caused the person to, like, sob as they dealt with, like, they went through this whole process of what am I doing wrong? And I sort of had to end up consoling them.
They made it about them. I love it. Yeah.
Well, no, because it is about them to a certain extent. Is the concept that they've been giving what they thought of themselves to make you understand that you were important to them and that you don't get it.
Listen, by the way, I have
them, and they feel
person.
like it's them.
I feel bad for this person. I'm sorry. I laughed because it immediately took me back to, like, when I broke up with my ex 5 years ago, and there was a mutual friend of ours, like, putting up photos of her, and I was like, listen, and I messaged them, I'm like, hey, I love you, you're great. I can't be looking at photos of her right now. And back then I didn't know how to unfollow somebody. So I just deleted them. And then, like, so he messaged me, like, going off on me about, like, how all these times I could have spent time with him, but instead I chose to go to the gym and some shit. He made it all about him. I'm like, this is, like, the most traumatic experience of my life, and you made it all about you. But it made me think about that. That's what made me laugh. I'm sorry to that person.
See, I didn't find the burn that transformative. I've not had a transformative experience at the burn yet. I've had amazing times at the burn. Utopia fucks me up every year, though. For real. I'm such a bad burner, and like I really am, because as much as the burn is cool, if I never go again, fine, whatever. But if you told me I couldn't go back to Utopia, I would fucking lose my shit. Utopia is vastly superior to the burn or anything else because it is intimate. It is my family. It is I could theoretically stop and speak to each person at Utopia and know them. Like with a few exceptions of new people, and I would welcome them and ask them how they came to find us because we're fucking rad. And I could see every piece of art. I could participate in every single thing. I could dance at every single stage. I could drink at every single bar. All of those people, those 3,000 people are my people. That's my family. I go to Burning Man, my family is my camp because fucked if I can find anybody else.
Yeah.
Like I saw you only because we had a meeting.
Yeah.
And we were there on a project.
She's referring to me, listeners.
I saw you only because we had to go to Media Mecca.
Yeah, saw each other for work.
And that was the only reason I found you on Playa, is because we were meeting at a place where I already knew where it was.
Yeah, it was such a pain in the ass. No,
but it does affect.
Yeah.
Like, because that's what you were asking. Is does it affect how you perceive your mental health and and it does. It does.
Well, and for me, it wasn't the burn itself. The burn was the culmination of the thing. But for me, it was the process of the project. Mm-hmm. And really what I felt was, prior to the project...
this was which project?
Core Starfish.
Yeah, the Starfish.
Starfish!
That one.
So prior to that year, someone had told me... I had been in San Diego a little while, and someone had told me that I had wasted my time here. That I had not made an impact.
Oh my god! Yeah, I still want to punch that. I still want to punch that person so hard.
Someone that at that time had been close to me. So yes,
dick punch.
Okay.
Someone who was involved.
That person's on the dick punch list.
Yeah.
And the process of building that project made me realize that was not a correct perspective. That was coming from their own issues and actually had no reflection on me.
Mine is community based too. I think that there is a level of acceptance in the burner community. It's not despite or in spite of your issues. It's because of them. We welcome you because you're broken, because you're creative, because you think differently. It's not in spite of that.
Yeah.
And
we don't tolerate you, we celebrate you.
That's a new thing. It was a new thing in my life. The various communities over my life that I've identified with, growing up Catholic, being pagan, being poly, being parts of those communities, being not all of which still applies. Those communities never felt like this. This level of there being value in your contribution, regardless of who you are, because of who you are, was not ever something I had experienced.
Yeah.
And it gave me a different baseline for value. It also fed into my ability to jump into projects and make myself invaluable to people, and I can do all the things. Watch me do all the things for you. How may I be of service to you? Yeah. It's a double-sided coin. This community and this populace accepts, celebrates, glorifies our individualities and our uniquenesses. But for me, at least, it also feeds into some of my coping mechanisms that perhaps don't serve me particularly well. They serve the community pretty good, though. Mm-hmm. They just don't maybe always serve me very well.
Yeah, that's a general I think that's a general way to... That's like the neurodiversity thing that we're talking about, though. It's everybody is useful. Everybody is important. Everybody is an important cog in the machine. We just have to figure out where to plug you in. Right. And that is the coolest thing. Like, that is absolutely what I love about this place.
All of my steps up into any sort of position of...
Having a hard time saying leadership?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, leadership has been encouraged from the community. For me, it has always been external, not internal. Yeah. I worked my first Utopia, and at that point, it was Meg that was like, hey, I have a place for you. And I was co-lead with her for city planning that year. And I was terrified and convinced I couldn't do it. And then when Meg stepped out of that role, and I also had a co-lead, but they hadn't done it before. Paul hadn't done it before, but Brenda had the previous year. Yeah. I was still terrified because I was like, well, shit, there's a lot of responsibility that I'm going to have, and that turned out well. And then this year, I was content hub lead, which meant because
Meg really walked away. Finally, Meg was like, "Okay, it's all yours back. I gotta go do something."
I had department leads under me, and I mean that was just. Yeah, I'm still terrified about that.
And trade. You can have my hub.
And no. And when people suggested me as regional contact, I was just like. Blown away by the...
Can I just mention, some of them weren't a suggestion. Some of them were literally, if you're only going to pick one person, pick her. Yeah. Like, for fuck's sake, you need this woman. It's like, some of them weren't suggestions. Some of us were like jumping up and down and shoving you down Iris's throat.
Yeah. And the feedback...
That's a fun visual.
The community feedback that we got from those proposals was very positive. And it's a demonstration of how the community props up each other, how we help support and encourage one another. And I hadn't had that before.
Yeah.
I felt that people tearing me down to make themselves feel better was just a normal method of how, that's how life went. And so being in the community that doesn't do that was very... I'm still adjusting. But it's very beautiful.
Yeah. We could be in worse places.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? I still occasionally wait for like the other shoe to drop and be like, psych, no, we don't actually need you to do this shit. Later, Meg. Yeah. I'll be like, okay, here's all the notes, bye, I'm out.
Do we have any final things we'd like to share with the audience since we've gone?
I want to do this again. And this was something Arash and I had talked about. And so part of the reason that it was Finn and I tonight, that when I said, okay, let me start booking stuff about mental health, was because part of being a stigmatized minority, part of being someone with a mental health issue, with a diagnosis, with different coping mechanisms, is that a lot of times nobody knows that about you. It's a thing that you don't show people. And so we're going to do another segment on mental health in the community. And one of the things I'm hoping that comes out of this is because Finn and I were, and Arash, who opened up to some of his stuff too, were able to stand here and be our authentic selves in this regard, that I'm really hoping that there'll be a couple people in our community who are willing to be the next names attached to a voice to speak on this. Yeah. So that's my hope.
I couldn't agree more. My primary drive in doing what I do, in creating, in, even like you're listening to me speak on this podcast, like listener, like it's hard for you to even imagine where I was a few years ago, but the drive that I had was because I come from a culture that likes to brush things under the rug as fast as possible. So, for example, child molestation, rampant in Iran. It is a huge problem. Nobody talks about it. So as an artist, like that's what drives me, is being able to discuss things and being able to remove the stigma by not hiding. Let's talk about it directly. Let's bring it out there. And I fully agree with you, Meg. Like I want to, let's find more people that are willing to
That's
come
my
out
job.
and strip naked.
That's my job. That's why I'm the producer.
Yeah.
I think oftentimes people who have had their voices taken away for whatever reason are often the best advocates for giving other people back their voices.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. It's beautiful that you said that, by the way. That's usually when I'm talking to younger artists, musicians, rappers especially. I had this artist, a friend of ours, Peaky, in the UK, and he's got all kinds of challenges as well. And he was saying, like, does it even matter, like, that I'm out here, like, I'm rapping about, like, my own personal life, and it's like, how narcissistic is that it's just like, it's all about me, and I'm like, no, dude, you are giving a voice to people who don't have a voice. There are people out there listening to your music that are like, I thought I was totally alone. And they can hear the things that you're going through. You're sharing your story, and that connects with them, and that's very important. It's a powerful thing. So thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful. I really enjoyed this.
This was
wonderful. All right, you can tweet me directly at Mr. Arash, and when discussing the show, please do use the hashtag #BurnerPodcast. You can also catch me on the Crappy Awesome Podcast, a weekly interview show and staple in the independent hip-hop community for 4+ years and 200+ episodes running strong. Find it over at platformcollection.com. Shows are up on Libsyn and SoundCloud first. Libsyn is the broadcasting platform. It's kind of a okay player, but that's the one that sends it to iTunes. SoundCloud has great quality, and that's where you can actually download and save the show for your own archives. Then it gets onto iTunes and Stitcher and TuneIn.com and some other fucking places that I don't know about. Leave some reviews on iTunes. That'd be really nice. Or don't. Whatever. But that'd be nice if you could. Our intermission music is by Duckman. Check out his music at duckmansd.bandcamp.com. And if you're a musician in the community, tweet our music editor, Navjeet. He is on Twitter at @IamNavjeet. The Burner Podcast theme song is America's Horse with No Name remix, produced by Joman. Check out his stuff at soundcloud.com/DJ Joman. He is on fire right now. He's got all kinds of singles coming out and touring and all kinds of shit. This episode is produced by Meg King. If you have any questions or suggestions for future guests, shoot them over to Meg King. She is on Twitter at @ThatMegKing. Our online editor is Tanasi. He writes and curates the blog. You can reach him by shooting a message to him at burnerpodcast.com under the contact page. Hope you'll join us next time. We release new episodes on the 1st and 3rd Wednesdays of the month. So, until next time, love and light and all that other crap. Good night.